name is Tasman, otherwise known as the Aspiring Kryptonian, and I'm joined today by none other than writer Brandon T. Snider. So, Brandon has just released a new title with DC called Supergirl's Family Vacation. It's out right now, and I've read it, and I can say it's such a wholesome read, I have to say.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I like that people think of it as wholesome. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that can be for some like negative, but it is not. I think we need wholesome. And it also
Especially
has
right
some
now.
bite here and there. It's not complete, there's a little bit here and there that is, I mean, it's not wholesome, but it's not too goody goody.
It's just the right amount, I think.
Right, right.
But how are you doing? And congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much. I feel good. I mean, like past couple weeks have been very busy. Um, but like, it's a weird feeling to have this book finally be out in the world because I started working on it. Like I pitched it in 2022
Oh God.
and then wrote it in 2023. And so it's just been like it feels like an eternity. And obviously I know it takes a long time to make a book, especially one that's like 120 something pages. And we wanted to make sure that Sarah Luber had all the time and space she needed to do her thing. But yeah, like the fact that it is finally out in the world is like, and just like getting positive response. I do go online and look up and see what people are saying. And it's just refreshing that people are getting it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like they see it for what it is, and are enjoying it. And that makes me happy.
Yeah. I'll say I'm the same. I would always look up something that I've worked on to see what people are thinking. But so you found the response really good.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is too, like, when people refer to fans, right, it's this very wide swath of people, and many of them have their own wants and needs that are separate from a sort of greater thing. And especially with like, things for younger readers, sometimes people will buy it and then go online and review it and say, well, this is for kids.
Yeah, I know what you
And
mean.
I'm like, yeah, it sure is. And so that it's been nice to have adults and people read it and be like, this is actually really fun. And I'm really like glad I picked it up. Yeah, I think of it too as, even though it is for middle graders, like it's aimed at middle graders, it is a very all ages
Absolutely.
read. And I like the format that DC does, because it feels like it's like a good travel read, right? You're on a train, you're on a plane, you're on the beach, you're somewhere where you're not looking to invest in like a book about macroeconomics. You know what I mean? You're just like, I want to read something light and fun
Yeah.
and enjoyable. And that's what I really think that like that whole line is about.
Yeah. Well, I'm absolutely not the target audience for this, but I absolutely loved it. And my son is 4, and he obviously saw me reading it. He was like, I thought that was for me in terms of the
I
artwork. So you
I
definitely will get it at some point.
I mean, this is the thing too, is that like I feel like it sits in a place, and I try to write, when I write for younger readers, like I try to just do the story and then keep in mind that there are some things that can't, go in either direction. But I try to write in a place where if you're a little bit too young, I mean, 4's pretty young, but like if you're a little bit too young, there's going to be enough in there that will upgrade your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to sort of start to understand, complex things or whatever, or a certain type of humor or whatever. And if you're a little too old, then it's like a nice, refreshing thing that you don't have to like struggle to understand, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's all very cut and dry. Yeah. So yeah, I like that sort of like in between, because that's another thing too about writing for younger readers, is that people sometimes want something that's very specific,
Yeah.
for that readership. And I'm like, I can understand that, from a marketing perspective, where they're like, we can't do it too. But I'm like, I think you got to give people a little bit to make them grow.
Hmm.
And aim a little bit younger so that kids have words to be curious about, like that's one thing that over the years, and editors will tell me, like, we got to remove some of the the bigger words. And I'm like, they'll ask somebody.
Yeah.
Like these are things that will invite inquiry. So
Yeah. And I was going to touch on this a little bit later on, but I think the way that you've got all the different characters, so you've obviously got Superman, Lois, Supergirl, John, who's very young in this. So I think when you're saying you're trying to cater for everybody, you really are, because I relate to some of the things that Lois is saying, and obviously Superman is
Right.
his parents, but also kind of also the same as Supergirl as well, just me being very, what's the word, stubborn.
Yeah. No, I mean, like the Lois thing, I really love writing Lois and Clark as parents. Part of my wanting to do this was to write this particular super family unit,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so writing Lois was one of my favorite things because, Superman is like his sort of dad persona is very much what you would think. He's a storyteller and he's always trying to relate something
Yeah.
to, and everyone's like, oh, here we go. Like another Pa Kent story. Wow, well, tell me about the farm. And Lois is smart and sharp and she chooses her different tact, right?
Yeah.
Like she's like respect with to Clark, but why do you keep talking to these kids that don't want to hear these stories? You know what I mean? Like, so when she has a couple moments with like Kara where she can be a little bit more like, look, I get it, girl.
Yeah.
I know, but like everything will be fine. Relax.
But it captured Lois perfectly. So I think we jumped the gun a little bit here, but I wanted to start at the very beginning. So how did this project sort of come about, and how did you get attached to it?
So I met Christy Quinn, who was our editor, back in 2019. And we had a really lovely conversation. And she really seemed to me like to be the type of editor that I wanted to work with, who is somebody that really goes to bat for creative. And she even said, she likes when she can just allow a creator to be able to tell their story. And I appreciate that. And so we met in 2019, kept in touch. And then eventually I pitched her something that ended up not happening. And then there was like a whole year where they weren't taking any pitches. So so like during that year of like, we're all stocked up, I was like, let me hatch some plans. And so during that time, I had seen the Super Pets movie
Oh yeah,
on a plane, and um, I was like charmed. Like I thought there was a charming element to it, and I like that Superman was humorous in it.
yeah.
And so I started to think about that, and then I sort of was like, I really want to tell a story about the super family, and a story that has not and could not have been told in the DCU because of continuity
Yeah.
shenanigans and aging and all that stuff.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, all right, I think I know what I want to do. And so when the time came again and Christy allowed me to pitch her something, I pitched this story. And I pitched it with Superman in the main role, just because that's how I had seen it at the time. But then when it finally got greenlit, like a year later, DC was rightly like, let's move Kara into the main role, and it made sense, and it was like, of course, that's like, and it opened up so many storytelling possibilities. By the way, this was also before we knew what James Gunn was doing with Superman and Supergirl, so like there was no, we want to do this to it, just all really just like happened.
And it's kind of
um
fallen at the right time with it coming with Supergirl coming out with the summer of Supergirl, because it's the perfect time to sort of market this kind of thing.
Absolutely. And like I think too, like, Sarah has been working on for a while. She probably could have we probably could have had it out for Superman, but it just it was better to let her do her thing and to let her have all the time she needed to
Yeah.
complete this. And so then when Supergirl with that coming, it was like, yeah, it just makes sense. And it is nice also to have a young reader's project out with the movie because there will be, I'm sure, young readers who are too young to see the movie,
Yeah.
who are going to want some to consume something, and so that this is the perfect thing to give them in the meantime.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, this version of Supergirl or the Superman family might actually be some people's first ever interaction with the characters. So what does that feel like in terms of, like you said, sort of getting them ready for the film when they're able to watch it of a certain age and things like that?
I love it. I mean, I love, as a fan, I to know that somebody, this might be their first experience as a comic, as you know, is a big deal because I remember like when I was a kid and like I would pick up a comic book and I have those, nostalgic memories of what that was to me. And that's like why I'm here. I mean, look at these figures. Like like, you know what I mean? Like, and I try not to, when it comes to like the nostalgia and stuff, like I'm a big fan of making sure that we don't become so enraptured with nostalgia and the way that we felt as kids that we're not doing something new or fresh or different, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that we can become so addicted to nostalgia that we lose sight of a lot of stuff. So, I hope that I can channel all my good sort of love for Superman that began when I was a kid into this sort of modern story, and not just sort of just rely on, it's hard because yeah, sometimes people get very rigid about, and this is my Superman. And one of the things too that is a reason that wrote this story is because I got kind of tired of the fans that and creators as well who would say things like Superman is too perfect or he's too good or there's nothing. And I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah.
There like Superman there does have faults and he does have things that you know that he does make mistakes. And so the story, as you know, there is it sort of began with me uh, with Superman making a mistake in the past, right? Like what happened, Superman hasn't, there's an oversight in his past, and that sort of sets things in motion. And uh, it's nice to see Superman in a position too where he can also say, maybe I didn't do the right thing, maybe I should have done more or whatever. And then also sort of use that to teach the kids. And also, but at the same time, Kara has a very good head on her shoulders.
Yeah.
I think young people can teach us a lot. Young people have a moral clarity that we don't. In our world, we see war and we see all of, pain and suffering, and we're like, well, what can you do? And kids are like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Kara's like, that's wrong. Natasha's like, that's wrong. John's like, that's wrong. And so it's like, I really like um, seeing this family unit who all shares this same ethos, sort of function in different ways.
And you really see that. So you really give them sort of a chance, each and every one of them to shine. Obviously, we've got Superman, we've got Lois, you mentioned Natasha, Irons, John. They all have their moments where they're teaching, not just learning about themselves, but also teaching the people around them things that they realize. And like you said, they have a totally different aspect of or how they see the world. So it's quite refreshing to see, and especially it's quite refreshing to see Superman make a mistake and admit to it. And in many ways, Supergirl is the perfect one to be able to sort of call him out on some of the actions that he has because they're in the same sort of situation.
Yeah, yeah. And it, I love I love that Supergirl, I mean, Supergirl has the most tragic origin.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people just don't know her origin, right? If you're not a fan of the comic books, you're not necessarily keyed in on that. But Supergirl has been through a lot, to have lost her entire world, to show up on a planet she doesn't know, having just been told by her parents, listen, we're going to send you, we're going to die, you're going to live, but you're going to also be on another planet taking care of a baby, your baby cousin. You, a child, are going to be taking care of it. And she was like, okay. And then she gets there, and the baby is the most famous superhero in the entire world. That is a, insane. And so for her to be able to function as well as she does is huge. And so I really it was nice to just be able to tell a story where she has this like little bit of hope, that she finds. And yeah, not to give things away, but it's like it all works out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've touched on this already, but there's a big balance of teaching readers and also the characters very important life lessons. How did you go about finding the balance? Because in some ways, this is quite a humorous and very fun story as well as all those sort of serious aspects. How did you find that balance?
Well, I think that there was a night, like I grew up on like 80s and 90s sitcoms. And so there's like I didn't want it to be like a very special episode of whatever, where it gets too serious or deep. But I feel like, going into it, knowing, having a really good idea of like what everybody wants, right, in this story and in the greater scheme of things,
Yeah.
and where everyone sort of stands. Um, eh, what I liked about Lois and Clark is that Lois does call Clark out, right? She doesn't put up with his whatever. She knows him very well. So
Yeah.
she can be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you saying this? And um, she knows what's in his heart, right? So she can be hard on him and
Hmm.
get him to talk about a lot of stuff. And this is a family that really is there for one another. So it's nice to see them interact in this really warm way, and managing all of those sort of like good feeling, heartwarming elements with action, was a big deal because I didn't want it to come across as, a lesson.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be so overt that we're like getting like, the lesson is being completely, um, you know, there is like verbiage along the lines of like what sort of lessons are in there, but not, I just didn't want it to be like, we're being preached to or whatever that sort of feeling is that people sometimes have. Anyway, but yeah, I think it was like finding the really natural ways to dovetail everyone's story into the same sort of thing. So it all makes sense at the end. And I have to say that Sarah Louver did such a good job on the art, that it's like there's so many evocative moments and emotional moments that by the time you get to the end, that there is like a really, the sort of ending sequence of events. Like it's really a beautiful sort of way to end the book. Like
Yeah.
because when I outlined this, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but there were gaps where I'm like, I don't know, I'll just sort of figure it out.
Yeah.
And at the end, I was like, yeah, this is what it has to be. Like this is how it ends, and this is where we go. And it made a lot of sense. And it really kind of like worked out for me better than I thought it was going to, instead of being like, oh my gosh, I have no, like I was like, oh, it actually worked. Okay. Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
good.
Sarah's art is great in this. It's the story. It's really
Yeah.
charming. It's got like I think it's got a balance because there are some moments that are quite emotional and you sort of get those emotional aspects from the artwork. But then there's all this, I think there's one in particular, I think it's John where he's pulling faces and it's very sort of anime style. And I think, yeah, the balance is done really, really well with that.
Oh
What
yeah.
would you like to
She
work
did.
with?
I mean, so we only met for the
Oh,
first
really?
time like a week ago when we both did a signing at a store in Houston called
Yeah.
Bedrock City. Um, I gave my notes in the script, and then Christy managed that process.
Okay.
And that's just how that works. It was, I did reach out to Sarah along the way and said, like, if you need anything, let me know. But, um, you know, I I don't like to go too deep into, panel descriptions. I want to make sure that we're all doing what we need for the story, but then also that Sarah has room to move and to interpret. And so it's a lot easier for me to just, describe, a mental state, be like, this is the hardest thing that Kara's ever done, and then see how that manifests, as opposed to being like, Kara's scrunching her face, or, and I might say Kara's scrunching her
Yeah.
face depending on what it is. But I think Sarah really interpreted so many things, and she layered in so many other things too. There's so many asides. We did like an ash can, or she put together this ash can of all of like her sort of development art, and it's so fun. If anyone sees us at one of the cons that we go to this summer, like, I'll have copies. But like it's so interesting because there's also so much stuff that like didn't make it into the book. There is a t-shirt that she has Cara wear that says it's the Space Girls in a font that looks like a very familiar, and she created these characters, the Space Girls. And I don't want to like totally blow up her spot, but like, like it was like perfect. I was like, I would love to write this into some, like So I'm like, yeah, if we ever get a sequel, maybe there'll be some room for the Space Girls. But it was like so perfect. And like, so she did just so much and made it all so rich that I just love it.
Just even seeing the art process in like any sort of book just fascinates me because when you see it in black and white before the colors and the inks and stuff, it looks totally different to what it does when it's finished. So was there any moments where obviously you know what you've put in terms of the script, but is there any moments in terms of Sarah's art that really shocked you? Not in a bad way, of course, but was sort of a highlight for you?
I mean, the first time that I like read the entire lettered book,
Mm,
I got really emotional because I was able to like step outside of my involvement in it. It was now a work.
yeah.
And it wasn't, my words. It was this work that had been created between the both of us. And like, I mean, when I saw the cover, like the cover was so great. I mean, gosh, even just like her development sketches, like every aspect, I've written a lot of stuff in my life, but this is the first full-length graphic novel.
Okay.
And so that has a lot of like special meaning to me.
Of course.
And just being like chomping to see more. I mean, anytime we got sketches or layouts, I was like, my God. Like it just knowing what was coming was just like so, I mean, it's been years. So I'm like, it's like so crazy to think it's finally out there, like after being like years of teasing.
And in terms of like the you said you were writing before that this is the first graphic novel because it's such of a lengthy book. There's quite a lot in there. So we visit different planets. We see all of the history in terms of what Superman has provided for that planet. So was that something that you kind of, I know some of it's come from deep cuts in terms of comics. I forget the character's name, which is terrible, but the lady that invites them to the other planet. So I know she's a bit of a deep cut. But what was your favorite things to create in terms of those atmospheres and things like that?
So I really love, I mean, I love DC's catalog of characters. So any opportunity that I have to just go do some research and figure out and find, um, so I was looking up planets and I was doing some stuff and I found Rogera,
Yeah,
which I really liked. And then I also found Rory Dag, who
yeah,
was the character, and they were from a long pre-crisis. And I thought like this character has this history in the DC universe that's like huge, and I had never heard of them before.
yeah,
And so I just felt like it was like a visually the character was interesting. And I just felt like it just made sense. And because we can play fast and loose with this continuity in this world, which is the best part because it's not, we have to stay true to some things, but like otherwise, nobody's gonna be like, well, Rory Dag, and like we can use Rory Dag, we can have a cameo here from whatever. But I love finding a character that is in need of purpose. And then there's a nod to Rory Dag's ultimate destiny in the book as well at the end of the book. And so yeah, so if you're a fan, and the history of Rory Dag, you'd be like, oh, okay. I mean, I would love to bring them back at some point too. Like it's just one of those things where maybe in the DCU, well, you never know.
yeah. A lot of the story is, well, to me, when I was reading it on and how I interpreted it, there was a sense of being overshadowed. So we see the different characters. Supergirl feels sometimes overshadowed by Superman, John also, Natasha in some ways. I won't spoil, but as the story goes, we see her get some insults sort of thrown to her. Why was that such an important thing to get through in this story, and how do you think it shapes these characters, specifically Supergirl?
Well, I wanted to make sure that we also like could see all these characters for who they are, right? Like they get in their heads, right? They feel a certain way, but when you look at their actions and when they look at each other, like Kara and Natasha are best friends, right? They love each other very deeply. And so to see that support, Kara can be like, oh, but Natasha's like, look, here's the deal.
Yeah.
Natasha can be like, but Kara can be like, you're actually great, right? And so it's that kind of camaraderie that I really like to see in young reader stuff. And John John kind of has a bit of a crush, we'll say, on Natasha in the sense that, when you have like a friend that has an older sibling who is like cool and talks to you and you're like, doesn't see you as a rugrat. Um, that, and Natasha is that to John, where he's just like, and so, somebody messes with Natasha and John is like, I will mess you up. And I just like that fierce protectiveness. And that's what this family unit is about, right? Like they are protective of one another and they're all going through their who am I? What am I doing? And Kara, of course, being the main and having the most angst of everyone. It was nice, not to spoil anything, but it was nice to have the opportunity to play with all these different emotional levels in a natural way. And you'll see how that plays out in the book. Um, uh, because we didn't, yeah, I'm like, how do I say this? Um, I don't want to spoil, but like there was I really wanted to show that the myriad of emotions, good, bad, ugly.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to be just pure Kara, right? There needed to be a catalyst that allowed us to see this, that didn't sort of frame her as a hysterical teen, right? And so because of those circumstances that allow her to do that, it's sort of like I don't know, it felt refreshing because it sort of drew these things out of her. And at the end, it was almost like she was just possessed. It was just a little possession. Um, but yeah, I'm a big fan of like Kara's emotional outbursts.
Absolutely. I know this was a Supergirl title, but I absolutely loved your take on John Kent in this. He was adorable and he was
Thank you.
so realistic as a child. Like I said, I've got a 4-year-old, a little bit younger than what John is in this book. But some of the moments where he's sort of like, "Oh, just watch this little dance," while at the most inconvenient time, I was like, I know this child." So
Yes.
in terms of the current comic book continuity, he's quite at a different stage, as we know in the DC comics at the moment. What was
Mhm.
it about this specific age and him going through the whole, sort of working out your powers that you wanted to touch upon with that?
Well, I love John. I just love Kid John, and I like Adult John too. But I think Kid John that we like lost a lot of great sort of story possibilities when he got aged up,
Yeah,
and that's comics. I'm over it. Like it's fine. Whatever it is, it is. I can handle that. But I really wanted to see more of um, him and him and Clark interacting as father and son, and then Kara as cousin, older sister role,
yeah,
right? To be somebody that's like, oh, like shut up, like be quiet, stop eating, like what are you doing? Like I think that dynamic is really interesting. And John, I just think there's something. People were asking me why I didn't include crypto, right? And I was like, it was just he was too chaotic, it was too many elements, right? So John is kind of like the crypto, right? He's the chaos agent, right? He's like, he's just eating constantly, like he's just like, what do we do, like all of that sort of like questions and stuff. And like I love that. And I thought he just was like a great way to inject some like comic relief and some uncertainty. Like you just don't know what John's going to be up to. And I like that he has his own adventure, right?
yeah,
He is a product of his father. And so there are parts of him that wants to be the good son and the good boy and tell the truth and all of these things. And so it's tough for him to not have his powers be at full volume yet
yeah.
because he just wants to be Superboy so badly.
Yeah, you can tell that he's definitely ready for it, but in terms of the powers that he's getting, they're not quite there yet. There were some
Yeah.
really fun Easter eggs in some of the background art that Sarah's done in
Mhm.
terms of, I think specifically the moment that stood out for me was the bit in the fortress where we see all the different aspects of what's going on there. What was your
Yes.
favorite one to include?
Let's see. I mean, Sarah, so the fortress, those things were all like things that I put in the script because
Okay.
but like I will say that there were like lots of things like Sarah did so many really fun things. I mean, I like that the Batman 89 towel at the pool that they have. There was what did the name of the gas station that they stop was Birdie's, which is based on Bucky's, which is an American like gas station chain.
Yeah,
Birdie's with like a Thanagarian bird logo. Um, but yeah, I like the Batman towel. That's probably my favorite.
it was pretty
And
cute.
all of the little, all of the aliens and things that she put in various places. There's also one scene when they're at the pool and there's just a starro in the pool.
Oh yeah,
Just
I saw that one.
where I'm like, yeah, I love it.
And there was some really fun costume sequences when they're sort of suiting up to deal with the things that they have to deal with in this book. For me, it reminded me of a mix between sort of Power Rangers or Sailor Moon or something like that. Was that the influence there? And towards the end of the book, we also see Supergirl don a new suit. What was that like to sort of create?
Absolutely. Like those were influences that were there. I like everyone, I think we needed a magical girl transformation.
Yeah.
And I love new costumes. I love costume. Like as a kid growing up, like I noticed eccentricities when costumes would change. I was just like on top of it. So I thought, yeah, like we're not, because they're on vacation, we're not getting costumed adventure time. So we need to, at the end of the day, like amp this up. And there was the whole thing with the costumes, like we, who was it that said no costumes? Was it Lois?
Lois, yeah.
Yeah. Lois was like, no costumes. And so like Kara took that seriously. And then, we see Superman, he has his thing, whatever.
Mhm.
But with Natasha, like she's always prepared. So she has these like discs that she brings with just in case. And yeah, I wanted to give Sarah a chance to also design something new and exciting. And I think she did. I love Supergirl's costume in it. I love that there is a celestial
Yeah.
sort of thing happening. And I love Natasha's. I mean, they just like she really did such an amazing job in these costumes. I love them.
I have to say, I really enjoyed the book, and I would love to see these characters again. What the possibilities of a sequel to this, and if have you even thought about that aspect in terms of what the next story might be?
Well, I have thought about that, what the sequel would be. I don't know if we'll ever, I don't know about a sequel. It's hard to say too, because like, sometimes books take so long to
Yeah,
make. And especially with middle grade, like when I do middle grade novels, we usually a couple get greenlit at the same time so that we can release them sequentially, one after the other, like a year later. And unfortunately with this, like it's just a singular thing. I think if fans like this book
hmm,
and buy it and tell people and tell DC about it that they like it, I think we could totally get a sequel. I always have to temper my expectations because I'm desperate to write a sequel. And I definitely have a story that I think would continue the first book and build on what was created, but take
yeah.
things in a different direction. Um, but yeah, but I've learned to temper my expectations and think positively, but also be realistic. So if you like it, if anyone that's watching this likes it, let DC Comics know that you would like a sequel, because I know that Sarah would love to
Yeah.
tell that story as well. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Well, I hope it happens, and I'll definitely be spreading the word. Don't you worry.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
there's a lot of characters in this book. We've got obviously we've talked about Lois, Superman, Kara, John, Natasha. We've also got Lobo and a few other characters. Are there any characters, not necessarily for the sequel, but in general, that you would want to work on that you haven't got that chance to do it yet?
Let's see. I mean, I'm a big fan of, I mean, you're saying just in DC in
In
general.
general, yeah.
I love Firestorm, and I'm glad that Firestorm is coming back.
Mhm.
That's a character that I've always wanted to write. I'm working on something for DC that is different right now that I can't talk about. That'll be announced. I don't know if it'll be announced at San Diego. It might be anyway. But it is a kind of, it is also set in space, which I will say.
Mhm.
Um, but it is a different beast completely. And I'm really excited. It was a couple characters that I originally was like, I don't know if I have a story for them. And then I did, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty great." But I like, I mean, I could really just like reach my hand into a fishbowl and pull out a character and be like, "I've got a thing." I like the oddballs. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the stuff that I would love to do to see is like conceptual. I was a big fan of the Justice League International, and I think that there's like a lot of room for character-driven comics with like a humorous bent, and sort of action, but also, I love the JLI because it was like a, very charactery. We got a sense of who these people were, and then there was action beats and all these other sort of things, but it wasn't yeah, we sort of could sit with them in their quiet moments and their big moments and just get to know them. And that's why people fell in love with so many of these characters that were considered second tier.
Yeah. And that's what I love. I love getting to know characters that I wouldn't necessarily know. Obviously, I'm a big Superman fan, as you may know, but obviously I know the characters involved in this book, but it would be exciting to get to know the other ones. But the one that you're talking about that you're working on that you can't announce yet, is that another middle grade graphic novel or is that a comic book series? Oh, yeah.
That is something else
Okay.
that I can't, yeah, I don't want to say too much, but I'm actually having a blast on it. It is something that I like I said, originally I was like, do I have a story? But then I did, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And the art that is being created right now looks so good. Um, and yeah, I think that when it comes out, I think it will come out and I think it will be enjoyed. I mean, like, I think that, yeah, from what I've seen
Yeah.
of the art, it just, yeah, I think it'll be a good thing.
Well, I'm looking forward to the announcement. But Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I've had a blast speaking to you about this book and had a blast reading it. For those that haven't got their hands on it just yet, copies of Supergirl's Family Vacation is available right now, and I cannot recommend it enough, especially if you've got young children and superhero fans in your life. It is something that you need to read. Even if you haven't got children, it's perfect.
I like that. Thank you so much for having me. I
Thank
appreciate,
you.
and yeah, like I watch your videos. Like you are a devoted Superman fan, and it shows.
Yeah,
And I appreciate. I'm just glad you liked it. You know what I
I did.
mean?
I
I
did.
appreciate that.
And going back to the Superman fan, my son's actually called Cal. So,
Oh, there you go. There you go.
but yeah.
You're in deep.
I am, and I feel sorry for my partner. But thank you so much again, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.